2:28 in the morning, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker sends its final signal to her phone. The tiny device implanted near her collarbone, designed to keep her alive, registers a disconnection. Something moved Nancy's phone beyond its reach. 8 minutes later, 2.5 miles away, a car slips past a Ring camera on a quiet residential road that leads away from her neighborhood. And for 25 days, nobody in law enforcement ever knocked on that door to ask for the footage. That 8-minute window may be the most important clue in this entire investigation. The timing is almost surgical in its precision. But before we break down exactly what it means, and believe me, we're going to take it apart frame by frame, you need to understand what happened inside Nancy's house during the 42 minutes that her doorbell camera went completely dark. Because what investigators now believe took place in that window changes everything about who they're looking for and why. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She'd built a life in a quiet corner of Tucson, Arizona, a sun-baked neighborhood where the houses sit far enough apart that you can't quite see your neighbor's front door from yours. The kind of place where people walk their dogs past each other's driveways and wave, where the loudest sound at night is the wind cutting across the desert. She lived alone. She had a pacemaker, a small medical device that stayed connected to an app on her phone, silently monitoring her heart, beat by beat. It was the kind of technology you forget is even there, until it tells you something you weren't ready to hear. On the night of January 31st, that connection, that quiet digital thread between Nancy's heart and her phone, was the last trace of Nancy Guthrie alive in her own home. Most people know Nancy's name because of her daughter, Savannah Guthrie, the journalist, the morning anchor, the public face of a family in agony. And we'll get to Savannah. We'll get to the $1 million reward, the FBI, the 300 law enforcement personnel who descended on this neighborhood. But right now, I need you to hold on to one fact: the footage that was sitting on a neighbor's Ring camera, 3 weeks of it, footage that could tell us the direction the person who took Nancy was heading. Law enforcement never came to collect it. A reporter found it first. We're going to reconstruct that night from the beginning. And by the time we're done, that 8-minute window, 2:28 to 2:36, is going to mean something very different to you than it does right now. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, I want to take a moment and welcome you. This is True Crime, Buff HQ. This is a justice-focused true crime channel. What does that mean? It means we honor victims. We expose evil. And we don't sensationalize suffering for clicks. Every case we cover on this channel, whether it's a breaking investigation like Nancy Guthrie's or a cold case that's been buried for decades, we lead with the victim's story. We follow the evidence. We don't cut corners. We don't chase sensationalism. And we don't stop covering a case just because the news cycle moves on. That's not how this works here. If that sounds like the kind of true crime content you've been looking for, hit subscribe right now and turn on that notification bell. We're covering the Nancy Guthrie case in real time, and we're tracking several other active investigations that deserve far more attention than they're getting. If you've already seen some of our other work, you know we don't do surface level coverage. And if you haven't, stick around after this video and check out our investigations into the Ashley Flynn case and the Haley Campbell disappearance. I think you'll see the difference. Now here's something I actually need your help with. and I mean that. We're covering breaking developments on this case and several others. And I want to make sure you're seeing these videos the moment they drop, not 12 hours later, when the algorithm finally decides to show it to you. So do me a favor, drop your city and your time zone in the comments right now. Whether you're watching from Tucson, from New York, from London at 3 a.m, I want to know where this community is so I can publish these updates when the most of you are actually online to see them. That one comment helps more than you think. It tells me when you're watching. It tells the algorithm this video matters. And it helps me build a publishing schedule around you. And one more thing. If you want to help Nancy's case reach more eyes, share this video. Send it to one person. Post it in one group. That's all it takes. The more people who see the surveillance breakdown we're about to get into, the better the chance that someone, somewhere, recognizes something. All right, let's get into it. Because what happened between 2:28 and 2:36 a.m. on February 1st raises questions that the Pima County Sheriff's Office still hasn't answered. Here's what we know. And more importantly, here's what we don't. On the evening of January 31st, Nancy Guthrie was home, alone, in a single-story house at the end of a quiet street in Tucson. There was nothing unusual about the night. The neighborhood was still. The desert air was cool. And Nancy's front door had a Nest camera, a doorbell camera that was recording to the cloud, monitoring the porch, capturing every movement, until it didn't. At some point in the early morning hours of February 1st, that doorbell camera went offline. For exactly 42 minutes, there was nothing. No video, no motion alerts, no record of what happened at that front door. 42 minutes of digital darkness. Now here's what makes those 42 minutes so critical. The camera didn't malfunction. It didn't lose power because of a neighborhood outage. Investigators believe the camera was deliberately disabled, taken offline by whoever was standing on that porch. And there's a reason they believe that. Because we have photos of that person. There are two key images that have been released to the public. The first shows a figure approaching the front door. No backpack, seemingly surveying the entrance. The second shows what appears to be the same individual, this time carrying a backpack at the front door during what investigators believe is the night of the disappearance. And here's where the timeline gets complicated. Law enforcement sources have indicated that one of those photos, the one without the backpack, was taken on a previous day. Not the night Nancy disappeared. A previous day. The question is, how previous? Some sources say the day before, but that's vague. But it could mean 11:55 p.m. on January 30th. Essentially, hours before the disappearance, or it could be much earlier. And there's a reason I think it's much earlier. Detectives canvassing the neighborhood kept asking the same question over and over. Do you have any footage from January 11th? That date, January 11th, kept coming up. It was specific, it was targeted, and it was nearly 3 weeks before Nancy vanished. Now the figure on that porch is important, but there's a detail about the timing of that earlier visit that almost everyone has missed. A detail that tells us something crucial about what kind of crime this actually was. We'll come back to that. What we know for certain is this. The figure in both photos appears to be the same person, same build, same clothing. And in the second image, the one from the night Nancy disappeared, he's carrying a backpack. Whatever was in that backpack, he didn't have it the first time he came to that porch. He came back for a reason. He came prepared. At 2:28 a.m. on February 1st, Nancy Guthrie's Pacemaker app registered a disconnection from her phone. Now let me explain what that actually means, because this is important. A modern pacemaker connects to your phone via Bluetooth. The device is implanted in your chest. The app runs on your phone. And as long as the two are within about 30 feet of each other, they stay linked. The app monitors your heart rhythm, logs irregularities, and transmits data to your doctor. When that connection breaks, it means one of two things. Either the phone was powered off or destroyed, or the phone and the pacemaker were physically separated by more than 30 feet. Think about what that means. At 2:28 in the morning, either someone turned off Nancy's phone or took it from the house. Or Nancy herself, with the pacemaker still in her chest, was moved far enough from her phone that the Bluetooth signal couldn't reach. Either way, at 2:28 a.m., someone crossed a threshold. Nancy's heart monitor lost contact with her phone. And whatever happened inside that house during the 42-minute blackout, by 2:28, it was over. Someone was leaving. So at 2:28 a.m., something or someone crossed a threshold. Nancy's heart monitor lost its connection. And exactly 8 minutes later, 2.5 miles away, a car passed a camera on a road that leads out of the area. Let me show you why that matters. Here's the geography. Nancy's house sits in a residential area of Tucson. The roads surrounding it are quiet, low traffic, especially at 2:30 in the morning. If you wanted to leave that house and avoid being seen, you wouldn't take a main road. You'd cut through the neighborhood. You'd take the back streets, the ones with no traffic cameras, no commercial surveillance, no witnesses. 2.5 miles away from Nancy's house, on exactly that kind of road, a neighbor had a Ring camera mounted on their home. And on the morning of February 1st, that camera captured a car driving past at 2:36 a.m. Now let's do the math. Nancy's pacemaker disconnected at 2:28. The Ring camera footage shows a car at 2:36. That's an 8-minute gap. The drive from Nancy's house to that camera, using residential back roads at a normal, non-suspicious speed, approximately 7 minutes. 2:28 plus 7 minutes of driving equals 2:35. The footage is from 2:36. If someone left Nancy Guthrie's house at 2:28 a.m., the exact moment her pacemaker disconnected, and drove at a calm, residential speed through back roads to avoid detection, they would have passed that Ring camera at almost precisely 2:36 a.m. That is not speculation, that is math. But here's what makes this worse. The homeowners who own that Ring camera, the people whose device captured this footage, say that in 25 days, not a single law enforcement officer knocked on their door to ask for it. No sheriff's deputy, no FBI agent. Nobody. When the Pima County Sheriff's Office first asked the public for help, they requested surveillance footage from anyone within a 2-mile radius of Nancy's home. This Ring camera was 2.5 miles away, just outside that perimeter, just beyond the line they drew in the sand. So who found the footage? Not investigators? A reporter. Mike Ruiz, working with Fox Digital, obtained the video and then forwarded it to the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Office. That's how law enforcement got it. 25 days after a 72-year-old woman vanished from her bed, A journalist handed them evidence that was sitting on a camera they never checked, on a road that leads directly away from the victim's house. 300 law enforcement personnel, the FBI national media coverage, presidential attention, and for almost a month, a potentially critical piece of evidence was sitting there, recording, rewriting, one overwrite cycle away from being gone forever, because nobody walked an extra half mile. Let that sink in. For the first several days after Nancy's disappearance, the working assumption from law enforcement, from the media, from the public, was kidnapping. Someone took Savannah Guthrie's mother. A ransom demand was coming. The FBI was brought in specifically because of this possibility. It's been 26 days. No credible ransom demand has come. Now, there were communications. People came forward claiming to be the kidnapper, multiple people in fact, but every single one was a hoax. Not a single person who contacted the family, the media, or law enforcement could provide proof of life. No photo, no video, no piece of information that only someone who had Nancy would know. Every claim fell apart under the most basic scrutiny. And that tells us something critical. Because professional kidnappers don't operate like this. Professional kidnappers are precise. They're fast. They take someone and they contact the family directly. Not the press, not TMZ, not a local news station. They go straight to the people who can pay, and they provide proof that they have what they're selling. It's transactional. It's mechanical. And it happens within hours, not weeks. None of that has happened here. Savannah Guthrie has publicly offered a $1 million reward, not for the capture of the kidnapper, for the recovery of her mother, even her mother's remains. Think about the language of that reward. That is not a family negotiating with a captor. That is a family preparing for the worst. The silence from Nancy's actual abductor isn't a negotiation tactic. It isn't some elaborate game. It's the silence of someone who never intended to take her at all. So if this wasn't a kidnapping for ransom, and it wasn't revenge against Savannah, then what was someone doing inside Nancy Guthrie's house at 2 a.m? The answer might be the most disturbing possibility of all, because it means Nancy's abduction was never the plan. Remember that earlier visit? The figure on the porch, photographed on a date before the disappearance? Remember that detectives kept asking neighbors specifically for footage from January 11th? Here's why that matters. January 11th is nearly 3 weeks before Nancy vanished. If the same person who appeared on her porch that night is the same person who came back with a backpack on the night of the disappearance, wearing the same clothes, approaching the same door, that's not impulsive. That's not random. That's someone who came to this house, studied it, left, and came back weeks later to finish what they started. That is textbook casing behavior. And it tells us something crucial about the nature of this crime. Here's the theory that more and more investigators and analysts are now converging on, and I want to walk through it step by step, because each piece builds on the last. Step 1, the target selection. An elderly woman living alone in a house set back from the street in a quiet neighborhood. From a burglar's perspective, that's close to an ideal target. Older women living alone tend to have jewelry, precious metals, sterling silver, items that are small, valuable, and easy to fence. This isn't about electronics. This is about the kind of wealth that fits in a pocket. Step 2, the reconnaissance. Weeks before the crime, the suspect comes to the house. He walks up to the porch. He looks around. He leaves. He's gathering information. Is the house occupied during the day? Does an alarm sound? Are there cameras? And if so, where? This is the January 11th visit, the dry run. Step 3, the return. On the night of January 31st, he comes back. This time he's carrying a backpack. Whatever he needed for the job, tools, a change of clothes, a way to carry what he planned to take, is in that bag. He approaches the door. He disables the doorbell camera. The 42-minute blackout begins. Step 4, the catastrophe. Here is where everything went wrong, for both the intruder and for Nancy. Investigators and criminologists now believe the intruder likely thought the house was empty. He may have watched Nancy leave earlier that day, get into an Uber, head out for the evening, and assumed she hadn't returned. But she had. Nancy was home. Nancy was in bed. And suddenly this isn't a burglary anymore. It's an encounter. We don't know exactly what happened inside that house. We may never know with certainty, but the range of possibilities is narrow and they're all horrifying. Nancy wakes up. She sees an intruder. She screams. She fights. Maybe she scratches him, gets DNA under her fingernails. Maybe the shock triggers a cardiac event. She has a pacemaker for a reason. Maybe there's a physical confrontation and the intruder, panicking, causes an injury he never intended. Whatever the specifics, the burglar now faces a problem he did not plan for. Nancy has seen his face. Nancy may have his DNA on her body. Nancy is the only evidence that can tie him to this house. Step 5, the decision. If Nancy is the evidence, Nancy has to go. Not because this person is a kidnapper, not because they had any interest in taking a 72-year-old woman, but because leaving her in that house, alive or not, means leaving behind everything a crime lab needs to find him. Step 6, the exit. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy's pacemaker loses its connection to her phone. Someone or something has moved beyond Bluetooth range. 8 minutes later, a car passes a Ring camera on a back road heading away from the neighborhood. This theory doesn't require a mastermind. It doesn't require a vendetta against a famous family. It doesn't require an elaborate kidnapping plot or a network of co-conspirators. It requires one amateur burglar who didn't expect anyone to be home and then panicked when everything went wrong. And if that's what happened, if Nancy Guthrie was taken not because of who her daughter is, but because a small-time burglar needed to cover his tracks, then the cruelest part of this story is that Nancy's fame is the reason the whole world is watching, but it had absolutely nothing to do with why she was targeted. The person who stood on Nancy's porch, looked at her camera, and came back anyway. That person almost certainly had no idea they were about to trigger a national manhunt. They didn't know Nancy was Savannah Guthrie's mother. They saw what every burglar sees: a house, an older woman, an opportunity. And that's what makes this so devastating, because it means what happened to Nancy could have happened to anyone's mother. As of today, day 26, there are indications that law enforcement is preparing to return Nancy's house to the Guthrie family. Just yesterday, a homicide detective and prosecutors were seen walking the exterior and interior of the house in what appeared to be a final assessment. Today, contractors arrived to install new surveillance cameras around the property. Security measures for after law enforcement's presence is removed. There was also a man who arrived in a Jeep, clearly didn't want to be seen, entered the property briefly, and left. His identity remains unknown. For the last several weeks, a sheriff's deputy has been stationed outside the home around the clock. That detail appears to be ending. The house, the place where Nancy Guthrie was last known to be alive, is about to become a private residence again. When law enforcement gives a crime scene back, it means one of two things. They found everything they're going to find inside those walls. Or they've decided the answers aren't in that house anymore. Maybe the answers are on a road 2 miles away, captured at 2:36 in the morning, on a camera that nobody thought to check. I need to say something that nobody covering this case wants to say. Right now, at this moment, there are more than 50,000 people missing in the United States. Adults and children, mothers and sons. People whose disappearances generated headlines, and people whose disappearances never made the local news. And being Savannah Guthrie's mother does not guarantee that Nancy won't become one of them. I know that's hard to hear. It feels impossible. With the FBI involved, with the president commenting publicly, with $1 million reward on the table and 300 officers working the case. How could this go unsolved? Because cases like this go unsolved more often than people realize. Natalie Holloway disappeared in Aruba in 2005. It took 18 years for a confession. 18 years of her mother refusing to stop looking, refusing to let the world forget. And even then, we never recovered her remains. There are cases where bodies are found accidentally by hikers, by construction crews, by dogs running off leash in the desert. And those discoveries crack cases wide open, sometimes decades later. But they require luck, and luck is not an investigative strategy. The most realistic path to solving Nancy's case, if the burglary-gone-wrong theory holds, is a tip. Not from the suspect himself. He's not coming forward for $1 million if he's gotten away with it so far. The tip will come from someone in his orbit, a girlfriend, a cellmate, a drinking buddy who heard too much one night, someone who sees $1 million and decides that loyalty has a price. That is who the reward is really for. In her most recent public video, Savannah Guthrie said something that stopped me. She said her family is blowing on the embers. That's not denial. That's not false hope. That is a daughter refusing to let her mother become a statistic. And it was the first time we heard Savannah articulate publicly that she's preparing for the possibility that her mother may not come home. There are reports that Savannah may return to New York soon. She has young children. She's been in Tucson for almost a month. And at some point, even in the worst grief, you have to go home. You have to hold your kids. You have to keep living, even when every part of you wants to stay and search. That doesn't mean she's giving up. It means she's surviving. And the least we can do, all of us following this case, is refuse to let Nancy Guthrie become a name people forget. But while we're talking about what we owe Nancy, let's talk about what the institutions owe her too. 25 days without collecting footage from a visible Ring camera on a plausible escape route is not a resource problem. It's a process failure. And it raises a question this community and Nancy's family deserve an answer to. What else is sitting on a Ring camera somewhere in that neighborhood that nobody has knocked on a door to collect? How many cameras overwrote their footage in the first week? Because nobody told homeowners to save it. How many potential images of that car on other roads at other angles are gone forever? Because the canvas stopped at 2 miles instead of 3. Instead of 5? It's been well established that in modern criminal investigations, video solves cases faster than almost any other type of evidence, faster than DNA, faster than witness testimony. We saw it in the Ohio dentist case. We saw it in the shooting of the United Healthcare CEO. Time and again, it's a camera that cracks it. And in this case, a case with the full weight of the FBI, national media attention, and a family offering $1 million, the most promising piece of video evidence was found by a journalist. That's not an indictment of every officer working this case. Many of them are doing everything they can. But it is a systemic failure that demands scrutiny. Because Nancy Guthrie deserved better than a 2-mile radius. That 8-minute window, 2:28 to 2:36, is the tightest forensic thread this case has produced in 26 days. A pacemaker disconnection, a car on a back road, a camera that nobody checked, and a timing match so precise it's almost impossible to dismiss as coincidence. Whether it leads somewhere, whether it becomes the break that cracks this open, depends on investigators doing now what should have been done on day one. Knocking on doors, collecting footage, following the roads that lead away from that house, not just the ones that lead to it. Be rest assured we'll be here, covering every development as it comes. If you're new here, subscribe. We are not going anywhere on this case, and we're not going anywhere on the others we're tracking. This channel exists because victims like Nancy deserve coverage that takes their story seriously. If this breakdown was valuable to you, share it with someone who's been following Nancy's case. One share can put this in front of the right person. And if you haven't already, drop your city and time zone in the comments. I read every single one. That's how I know when to get these to you. I'm linking 2 videos right here. Our previous coverage of the Guthrie case and our deep dive into the Ashley Flynn investigation, one of the most undercovered cases on this channel. If you want to see how we approach these stories from the ground up, start there. I'll see you in the next one.